In a moment of complete desperation, what do? Do you run, hide, curse the situation you're in, or do you desperately cling to God, knowing He is the only one who can get you through? Well, today I'm talking to Nate and Anna Weeber, a couple who have walked through the valley closer to death than any of us would care to be. Their story is shocking, heartfelt, and it will give you a tangible point of reference to see and know that God is a God of miracles. This is an episode that I believe is going to stir up hope deep within you. I pray it causes you to dare to believe that whatever trauma or hardship you're facing, the situation can be redeemed. Let's tune in now to hear the powerful testimony of God's goodness in the lives of my guests, Nate and Anna Weeber. Well, today I have some amazing guests that have a wonderful but hard but very inspiring story. And I'm going to be talking to Nate and Anna Weeber. Nate and Anna, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for
Our
having
pleasure.
us.
You went through a really, really hard time, and you wrote a book about that hard time. So can you tell us a little, rather than me try to intro your story, I thought it'd be better if you talked about your story and just walked us through it.
Yeah. So this happened in September of 2016. Nate and I were in our room. Our little 1.5-year-old son was playing quietly in the living room by himself, which he rarely did. So we were just soaking in the quiet and peace for a while. And I was sitting on the bed, and all of a sudden I just got the most intense headache that I've ever felt in my entire life. At this point, I was 26 weeks pregnant. So I just thought, this is just another typical pregnancy migraine. I also got headaches 3 to 4 times a week ever since high school. Never really knew why. So I didn't often tell Nate every time I had a headache, because after a while I just felt like a dripping faucet. Like he doesn't need to be burdened with one more thing.
Right.
So the whole room was spinning. I just started sweating, and it just felt like there was a balloon.
And you were home alone. Nate wasn't there.
Nate
Thankfully,
was there.
I was in the room with her. I was like 5 feet away from her when it happened, by
Yep.
the grace of God.
Mhm.
So Anna gets a really bad headache. And first went to get some Tylenol just to try to manage the headache. And then it progressively got worse to the point where I called the OB's office. It was, of course, a weekend, so couldn't really do a whole lot there. From there, Anna felt like she had to throw up. So she went into the bathroom and threw up into the toilet. And then she basically passed out, I thought, and fell into the corner between the toilet and the wall. And when I pulled her away from the wall, obviously I knew it was serious, so I called 911 right away. And they had me ask Anna to smile and to lift her arm above her head. And at that point, only half of her mouth smiled and only one arm went above her head. And then at that point, they had an ambulance come right over and rushed over to Holland Hospital.
Anna, had you ever had that type of headache before? You said you had a lot of headaches throughout your life. What was different about this headache?
Usually migraines or headaches for me started out rather slowly and would progressively get worse, but this one was just so intense and so strong right from the start. It was just like a rubber band had snapped, and it was just pressure suddenly right away. Just the most intense, worst headache I've ever felt in my life. So that's how it was different. And the cool thing was I was feeling these nudges from God that just said, tell Nate that this is serious. And I tried to push that nudge away how many times, but this nudge just kept coming back. Tell Nate. So eventually, after he did get me Tylenol, then I just said, Nate, this is serious and I'm scared. Something's seriously wrong here. So that gave Nate the indication that this was a different migraine than I've ever experienced before. So then I was rushed to the hospital, and they did a CT scan, and they found that I had a severe ruptured brain aneurysm. And then because of the severity of it and being 26 weeks pregnant, they rushed us to a hospital closer where they could handle that sort of
The
emergency.
Spectrum out in Grand Rapids. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, Nate, you must have been beside yourself.
I was completely beside myself. I mean, I remember, so I wasn't allowed to ride the ambulance with Anna. So I followed in my car behind. I can picture it like it was yesterday, even though it was over 6 years ago. And yeah, like you said, being beside myself. And I remember being in the hospital room, and the doctor came in after they had given Anna a CT scan, And I remember him throwing out the word aneurysm. And I was like, what? Isn't that for like elderly people or unhealthy people or something like that? And the first question they asked was, is your wife a heavy smoker or a drinker? And I was like, no, none of those things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I remember just being floored with even hearing that word.
So what did you do with your baby at home?
Yeah. So I immediately texted my family and said, something's wrong with Anna. Please pray. Sorry, the emotions come back pretty quickly
Of
when we talk
course.
about this stuff. So I immediately texted our family that something was wrong with Anna and to pray. And my parents came right over and picked up our son, Declan, who's now 8, and took care of him. And then my parents and Anna's parents watched our son while we were in the hospital for 18 days.
It's wonderful to have family around, people that just sort of show up.
It is.
So you went into the emergency room, you have a ruptured aneurysm, and you're lying in the ER, and then what?
So then they bring us to Spectrum Health, and from there, they asked me a series of 4 questions every 10 minutes or so. What month is it? Where are you? Who's the president? And for the first few hours, I was nailing these questions. So far, the aneurysm was not affecting my cognitive or physical abilities or whatever. But after a few hours, then they came in and they said, who is the president? And I said, Apple Crisp. And they said, where are you now? And I said, something totally off. So that's why they do those questions, to see if and when this starts happening. So they knew that they had to do something quickly. So from that point, they decided to drill a hole in the top of my skull and insert a drain to help relieve that pressure and kind of get rid of the building fluid and blood that was inside my brain now.
It's a pretty gruesome procedure. Nate, did you know what was going on with her, Nate, when they had to do that with Anna?
Yeah, so I was in the hospital the whole time. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I was right by her side when all of this happened and the decisions were made. And the neat thing, though, was that our neurosurgeon, Dr. Justin Singer, he's about the same age I am, and his wife was also pregnant at the same time, about the same far along in her pregnancy. So as he was making decisions for Anna, he was talking all of those through with me, and he was coming at it from this perspective of, if this were my wife, this is what I would do. And it sure gave me a whole lot of peace of mind.
Yeah, it sure does, doesn't it? When they make it, so personal and go, I get what you're going through. So then you had the drain put in. I assume it wasn't a blood clot that was thrown. It broke and it was bleeding all over the place. When you had the drain put in, did they put you in the intensive care unit then?
I was in the ICU. Yep. And we saw God work and God's presence in literally every single area throughout our whole entire journey. But one of the amazing things was, from me lying on the bathroom floor up until after brain surgery, I remember none of it. Whether I was unconscious, blacked out, whatever. But I'm so thankful for that, because I know how detrimental stress can be to a developing baby. And the fact that I didn't need to worry about who had Declan or how my family was doing, or even the simple thing of needing to shave part of my head, for brain surgery. I didn't need to worry about any of that.
So when did you wake up?
Yep. The first thing that I remember is after brain surgery, Nate came into the room, and we just hugged and kissed, and we were just laughing together like, did this all really just happen? Did I really just have brain surgery?
Yeah. So you're laughing.
Are we dreaming right now?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the amazing thing throughout this, as we've been thinking over the whole situation and how God was present, we just had a peace the whole time. And obviously it was very stressful and a situation that I would not recommend anyone get into, but there was a peace there too. And Anna's just my best friend. So, when she was out of brain surgery, it went well. I remember being in the room and just joking, you just had brain surgery. And
right.
Before this happened, we had just watched a Michigan football game. It was a beautiful, sunny, 75-degree Saturday afternoon. It went from that to next time we really talked was she was out of brain surgery.
Isn't it amazing? In just the snap of the fingers, your life goes from wonderful to horrible, and you don't know what's going to happen. And I think, my husband's had some medical problems too. And as a spouse who's healthy, It's terrifying because your mind goes through
Mm,
all of this stuff. So, Anna, you couldn't remember anything, but Nate probably remembers you
right.
saying apple crisp. I don't know, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
and as a
Oh yeah.
spouse, because you're so out of control, there's nothing you can do. Your mind always goes to the worst place. And, it just is terrifying. So it really was a real gift to you, Anna, that you didn't have to go through all of that. So you talk about
Yeah.
God's peace. Describe it. Was God's peace, everything's going to be okay, she's going to heal, or was it more, it's going to be okay no matter what? Talk about that piece.
So, me being human, I like to control things, as we all do. I'm a financial planner, so I'm a planner by nature, looking into the future, controlling variables to get a specific outcome, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of who I am by nature. And immediately, this was out of my control. And I don't think I've ever been in a situation like that before, to be quite honest. I at least feel that I can control things to a certain degree. And immediately, it was out of my hands. And the only place you can turn as a believer then is faith. And thankfully, that's where I turned right away. And that's where the peace came from. And it was a peace that God's with me. And whatever the outcome is, it's, as a pastor told me growing up, everything is father filtered. And this is father filtered. God knew about this. He's right here with you. And whatever the outcome, it's going to be okay.
Just by God's grace, we were, like you said, we just had so much peace throughout. In the book, we talked about the peace that passes all understanding. We were to such a point that we were like, whether the outcome is what we want or whether it's not what we want, whether it ends with me in a wheelchair or whatever, we were so okay with whatever God's will was because we knew that He would be glorified in our story and through this situation. And we don't say that at all to be, we're so spiritual or holy or whatever, but it was only from God that we could have felt that peace the entire time.
And it was interesting. Outside of the hospital, there were so many people smoking, ironically, outside of a hospital. But I remember thinking if I wasn't a believer and didn't have deep faith, this is when somebody would easily turn to alcohol or drugs. And
Mhm.
I remember feeling that feeling of not hopelessness, but it's faith or nothing else. That's all I had at that point.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people realize that, but they've never been in a situation where you were, where they have to choose. I remember it was so beautiful when we saw the football game a couple weeks ago, and I don't remember the gentleman's name who got hit in the chest, his
Damar
heart
Hamlin.
okay, fell on the ground, and immediately all of these enormous big football players, boom, on their knees praying. Because when you
Yep.
have a crisis that fast, you either stand there and do nothing or you reflexively turn to God. And to me, that's one of it's clear evidence that most people in their heart know there's a God, but a lot of times they're just not willing to see it or acknowledge it or to believe until their backs are against the wall. So to me, that was a very beautiful scene. And I think about you guys, it's like, boom, you went to your knees. I mean, not literally, but when you were in a crisis situation like that. So after you got out of the intensive care unit, I assume, Anna, you got better and better as you were there. Did you have any complications after the surgery?
Yeah, so our neurosurgeon said that often the first 3 to 4 days after brain surgery are kind of the honeymoon period. Typically, things go pretty smoothly. Around days 5 through 7, sometimes these storm clouds can come in, and they're in the form of, they're called vasospasms. So, what these are, they're the constricting of the blood vessels inside of my brain, just due to the draining of the blood. And what happens when vasospasms happen is the blood vessels constrict, so they turn off blood flow to different areas of the brain. Obviously not a great thing. Dr. Singer said vasospasms actually can cause more damage, more harm than the actual aneurysm itself. So we were obviously praying those away. However, on day 6 they did come, and they came pretty strong. So I did have to go down to the operating room again to have another procedure called an angiogram. And what that one was is they inserted a catheter into my groin, which had a camera on it, I think, right?
Mhm.
And then that went up through my body, up into my brain. It found where the spasming was happening, and then they were able to apply medication directly to where that spasming was happening.
And to add to the complication, so Anna's pregnant, so she couldn't receive a lot of the normal protocol of treatment. So one of the PAs or doctors put it, were almost flying blind to a certain degree, where they had to trust that what they were doing was in the right place, and because they couldn't use the normal, whatever methods that use radiation and that sort of thing. So there's definitely an element of trust and faith to that too.
Yeah. Isn't that extraordinary when you think about it? Putting a catheter in and going up into the blood vessels of your brain and shooting in some medication.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's what they can do now in medicine. How did you know you were having vasospasm on it, or did you not? Did you feel something different? Were you thinking peculiar things? How did you know that was happening?
Yeah, so ever since brain surgery, the nurses would have to come in every single hour, day and night, ask me those same 4 questions and test my physical abilities to see if I was having any deficiencies of any sort. So they ended up doing an ultrasound by my neck, and that's how they found that the spasming was happening. I think they did an ultrasound every morning. So then they saw that those numbers were very elevated. So that's how they knew they had to do an angiogram. I was, by God's grace, again, I was having absolutely no physical or cognitive deficiencies, which the doctors were just floored by. They said, for as high as your spasming numbers are, this is really amazing that you're not having any physical or cognitive deficiencies. So after that angiogram, I think every 8 hours, I had to have this medication inserted into my brain drain. And that was by far the most difficult time in the hospital. I'm still in the ICU at this point. And we found out that within 10 minutes after administering this medication, I would just projectile vomit everywhere. So they had to insert this medication every 8 hours to help ease that spasming. And just knowing that every 8 hours, that same scenario was going to happen, I had to keep my legs still so that that wound wouldn't open up. And then I also had to keep my head at a certain level because there's this bag of fluid that had to stay a few inches, underneath my brain. So anytime I wanted to scooch up in bed or adjust in any way, I had to call a nurse. So when I'm vomiting, I had nurses holding back my shoulders, and other nurses were holding my leg down so I won't reopen that wound. And it was just the most terrible and probably just disheartening time for me. But it was also during that time that Nate shared with me something he had found. It was a story from Malachi 3 that talks about refining us and purifying us like silver. And the story went, how a silversmith, how he refines and purifies silver is he puts it in the very hottest spot of the fire. And the silversmith needs to keep his eyes on that silver for the entire time, because if it stays in the fire for even a moment too long, that piece of silver will be destroyed. And it was just such a great reminder to me, knowing that God has his eyes on me the entire time, and he will not let me stay in this fire for even a moment too long. And the awesome challenge to that story was that when the silversmith knows when that piece of silver is done being refined is when he can take it out of the fire and when he can see his own reflection in it. And that was just in the hardest time, that was such a challenge and encouragement to me, knowing that, yeah, we're all going to go through that fire, those trials, those hard times. But our goal should be to come out of those trials, out of those hardships, looking more like Jesus Christ, our Savior. So that was such an encouragement to me during that hard time.
Well, the story just keeps unfolding, and it's very concerning on every level. As a doctor, I understand the magnitude of what Anna's condition was at the time. And let me tell you, it wasn't good. When we come back, you're going to hear more of the shocking details of what the Weebers went through and how beautifully interwoven God was in the whole process. Welcome back to Parenting Great Kids. My guests today are Nate and Anna Weeber, a married couple from Michigan and the parents of 3 beautiful children. They authored a book called 18 Days of Grace, which details the story they're sharing with me today of how Anna and her baby almost had a fatal ending, but God. Let's jump back into my interview with Nate and Anna on today's episode of Parenting Great Kids. When you were in the hospital and throwing up and people are holding you back, were you able to say to yourself at that time, I'm being refined and I'm going to be able to see the reflection? Or was there part of you that goes, I don't really care. I just want this to stop. So, I mean, I think there's a human element and then there's the faith element.
Yeah.
What were you feeling? I mean, did you go, oh, this is all going to be worth it? Even though this is horrible right now, it's all going to be worth it. What were you thinking
Oh,
at that time?
I definitely had both of those feelings
Hmm.
from one extreme to the other. I was at one point, feeling all convicted and challenged. And the next minute, I was just like, why me? This is
Hmm.
just so hard. And my butt hurts and my back hurts. And I was on bed rest and, 26 weeks pregnant. And I just wanted to go home and eat apple crisp and
Hmm.
just enjoy fall with my family.
Hmm.
So I definitely had both of those emotions for sure.
And Nate, I assume you were with her every day watching all of this. What were you going through as you watch your wife go through this horror of getting medication, knowing she's going to get sick, being held down? What was it like?
It's just the worst. As I mentioned before, Anna and I are just the best of friends. And as a husband, um, you want to do whatever you can to take pain away from your spouse or your family, and you want to protect them. And knowing that that was coming up was just heartbreaking to watch. Just knowing that that was part of the process. I willingly, helped out as I could, and I was a recipient of a fair amount of that projectile vomit along the way. But
Oh,
very
man.
is
Yeah.
absolutely heartbreaking to see that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how was your baby? I mean, you're 26 weeks pregnant, probably 27 weeks after. Wow. Did they monitor the baby?
Yeah, they came in every day, and actually, he was doing so well after brain surgery that instead of the scheduled 2 ultrasounds a day, they took it down to just one, and then even less than that. But God just protected him in a little cocoon, and he has absolutely no deficiencies or anything from the whole experience. So we're praising God. We're so thankful.
And they,
Mhm.
they initially gave Anna a steroid shot, or gave, I guess, our son a steroid shot, just to rapidly develop his lungs in the event that he'd have to be delivered due to trauma during brain surgery. Thankfully, that wasn't
Mhm.
the case. But you should tell the story about your heartbeat.
Yeah. So in the midst of brain surgery, they were obviously monitoring me and they were monitoring Hudson. And at one point during the surgery, they couldn't find his heartbeat. And saying those words just breaks my heart. But they rushed in an ultrasound machine and they found that the reason they couldn't find his heartbeat was because it was perfectly in sync with mine. So I just think that's
Oh,
one more place where God was just like,
wow.
I've got you. I've got him.
Yep.
Don't worry.
Mhm.
Trust me.
Don't worry. But
Mhm.
it's hard when
Yeah.
you're pregnant and you have this beautiful, I mean, it's hard enough even if you don't have any issues to not worry about your unborn baby, but going through something like that, I
Yeah.
would have thought about everything that I'd taken.
Yeah.
Will it hurt him? Will it hurt him? Well, it doesn't, there's nothing you can do about it anyway, because obviously they're going to take good care of you. So when did you go home from the hospital? How many days? 18 days?
15 days. Yep. And it was on,
Hmm.
you should tell the day 12 story, just a place where we saw a miracle, complete miracle.
Yeah. So on day 12, one of our pastors came over, and actually before that, so on day 12, they were hoping to remove the brain drain, we call it, from Anna's brain. And really first they shut it off to see if Anna's brain can get back to regulating the brain pressure on its own. They kind of test it first. Normally, on any given day, the human brain is between a 10 and a 25 as far as that pressure scale goes. There was a monitor, showing blood pressure and oxygen level, and then the pressure of Anna's brain. Normally, it's between a 10 and a 15. And if you'd sneeze or cough or something like that, your brain pressure bumps up to a 20 to 25. And then God's designed our brain to be able to then slowly regulate that pressure back to a normal range. When we initially got into the hospital, Anna's number was up to a 40, so a very elevated pressure. And
Mm.
so they wanted to test Anna's brain. So they had shut the drain off and wanted to see what happened over the course of an hour or two. Our pastor at the time came to the hospital at that time, and there was an art competition called Art Prize downtown Grand Rapids. So we were out walking around and chatting and kind of getting my mind off things after spending some time in prayer together. And as I was walking back into the hospital room, one of the nurses caught my attention, and she said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know that the doctors are thinking that first test failed, and so we're gonna attempt the test again at some point. But just wanted to let you know." And so I went into the room by Anna's bedside, and she was sleeping at the time. And I remember looking at the monitor and watching that number of Anna's pressure, and it was floating kind of between a 16 and an 18. It didn't go any higher or lower than that, but just kind of moving up and down. And I haven't been able to share the story without crying yet. So clearly you're not going to be the first
Good
one.
for you. I mean, yeah, this is serious trauma.
So the numbers staying high, floated between a 16 and 18. And at that point, I just opened my heart up to God.
Did you think you were going to lose?
No, I didn't think I was going to lose on at that point, but if the brain drain being shut off wasn't successful, if Anna's brain couldn't regulate that pressure, then the alternative option is they insert a shunt between Anna's brain and down into her abdomen under her skin that's permanent. And obviously not a big fan of that. And I had a heart-to-heart with God and just declared to him that I wanted Anna to be fully healed, 100% healed. And I've never done this before. It was throughout this experience, I learned some lessons on prayer from other people that came in, just experiencing their prayers for Anna. And I almost pulled a Gideon, and I told God my heart and that I wanted Anna to be fully healed. And I said, if you're going to completely, fully heal Anna, I want to see a number 12 on that screen.
So you really gave it to him. Said, okay, come on. I want to see it. Yeah.
I did. I was at that point. And so I said I wanted to see the number 12 on that monitor. And within 30 seconds to a minute, that number worked its way down to 12, long enough for me to grab my phone and take a picture. And then it moved back up to between a 16 and an 18. And I just remember being completely floored and in awe that the creator of the universe was right there in that room with me. And either one of two things happened. Either God changed the number on the monitor, or he changed the pressure in Anna's brain to reflect on the monitor right in front of my eyes, and I believe directly communicated with me, and just floored that the creator of the universe is also Emmanuel. He's God with us, and he's right in it with us.
He is there. And sometimes I think what I've experienced in moments like that, which aren't many for me in life, maybe 3 in my life, 4, is that there's a sense that you know it was God, and nobody can take that away from you. I mean, even if you tell it to people and they go, oh yeah, come on, somebody bumped the monitor. No,
yeah,
I know that I know.
Yeah.
And so did you get that sense when you saw the 12?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
So how long after that was it that her pressure came down and they were able, I assume she doesn't have a shunt. Or do you have a shunt?
No, she's fully, completely healed. Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, after that, then they tested again a number of hours later, and then her brain was functioning again to regulate that pressure.
Yeah.
So praise the Lord.
And they were able to take it out on day what? Do you remember?
Day 15.
And then did you have to stay in the hospital for a little bit, or they let you just go home?
4 more days in just a normal floor, which was beautiful. Much less beeping, much less monitors, nurse checks. It was wonderful. I could actually walk.
Nobody coming in every hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It was wonderful.
Wow.
Yep. And then 18 days, later, we were able to go home and
go pick apples and eat apple crisp.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Apple crisp must have never tasted so good to either one of you. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. And you mentioned those moments of seeing God. And as we went through this experience and as we look back, there were so many moments of God preparing in advance. One example of that is that a month before this happened, we bought a chest freezer, which stayed in a box in our basement until a week, the Saturday before Anna's aneurysm ruptured. And so it was in the basement. It was open. I hadn't even plugged it in yet. And then Anna has a brain aneurysm rupture. 3 days later, the meal train started, and all of a sudden we had a chest freezer overflowing with food. It didn't have a chest freezer before, didn't have room for any of it, but all of a sudden God gave us, a space for his provision.
Yeah.
Even the tiniest little things, a
Yep.
chest freezer.
Yep.
He cares about every single detail.
Yeah.
Every detail. And, and it's pretty remarkable. And I think that's one of the biggest things that maybe keeps people from faith on that deep of a level is like, okay, come on. God's going to do maybe big stuff, but not little stuff like that. But he does.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful, to watch him work. Well, I can tell you as a physician, just hearing your story, it makes me cringe because I've been on the other side of that, watching that intracranial pressure. And for us, it's pretty nerve-wracking. I mean, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure at some point, even though you were in the hands of really great medical care, because Spectrum's a great hospital, I'm sure at some point your doctor was kind of holding his breath a little bit, because what you had, I don't even need to say it, but was life-threatening.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people die from that, or they come out of it with significant brain damage.
Yeah.
And you not only do you have any residual physical problems?
No, not one. Nope. 50% of people who have a brain aneurysm end up passing away. They don't even make it to the hospital. And then from those that do make it, 75% end up having physical or mental deficiencies from it. So the fact that I have absolutely none, only by the grace of God.
It's a miracle. I mean, it's probably miracle number 34 that you had during those 18 days.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. And then I'm sorry. And then Hudson, when was he born?
Yeah, he was born December 30, 2016, and he was 10 pounds 4 ounces. Just
big
a
boy.
Big boy.
Did you have a C-section?
Oh no. He came out all 2 pushes though. So I was a little bit nervous for the pushing part, just knowing during the pushes, am I going to have another explosion or whatever?
Right.
So the fact that even God just allowed him to come out in 2 pushes was just one more God thing showing up.
Yep.
Well, that must have, after what you'd been through, that must have felt like a piece of cake.
Yeah.
I don't have anything stuck in my head. I'm not throwing up. Boom. I got this huge, a ginormous baby out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big baby.
Yeah.
Wow. And how is he doing now? How old are your kids?
Wonderfully.
Yeah, we have an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 3-year-old, and our little girl is going to be 1 in a couple weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's really a remarkable, remarkable story. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, God kind of just opened the door for this a year or so after this whole journey happened. And throughout our whole journey, Nate was posting these Facebook messages, and his Facebook message, so many people just said his faith in these, he was specifically asking for prayer, throughout each day. So each chapter is a different day in the hospital, and it includes those Facebook posts inside the book. And just to be able to look back at that and see his faith and just his love for me, it's so, so cool. God was able to open up so many different doors. People magazine got a hold of us in Women's World, and we were on the 700 Club. So God just started opening these doors for us, and we were able to make his name great in all of these different magazines. And we were just able to share his love and his healing. And so we just said, wherever God opens a door, we are going to absolutely share what he's done in our lives. And the book was just one more place where we were able to do that.
So we wrote the book called 18 Days of Grace, and it essentially, the number 18 comes from the number of days that Anna was in the hospital. And it walks through day by day, starting with Facebook posts of what we were experiencing, and it goes through from Anna's perspective and my perspective, what was going on and what we saw God doing behind the scenes, and just a really neat way to share our story.
So it's 18 Days of Grace.
Yep.
Yes.
Did you both write it, or did you write it, Nate? Because you probably have a better memory of what was going on, don't you?
Initially, but Anna's a sharp cookie. She kept most of her, really all of the memories from that point. So we co-wrote it together. We each kind of split up. Anna shares a little snippet from her perspective, and then I share, a little bit from my perspective, and essentially co-wrote the book together.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Anna, has your memory around that time come back, or do you still feel that they're sort of blackout times? Like you said, when you went into the hospital and then you went into the ICU and had the drain put in, has any of the memory of that period come back, or has it still stayed kind of blacked out?
It still stayed blacked out. I have one memory. It was after when I was in Spectrum. Then I remember laying in the hospital bed. No one knew if I was even going to make it at this point. And I remember looking around, and I looked over, and Nate was crying. And I looked over my in-laws and my parents, and I saw my dad just weeping. So that's the one memory that came back to me. And when I think about that picture, I just think about our Heavenly Father, and how when I was going through that, it hurt him too. He does not like it when his children are in pain or when we're going through hard times. But just seeing that picture and just being reminded that our Heavenly Father, even in those hard times, He will never leave us or forsake us. And His heart breaks along with ours when we go through those hard times.
Yeah. Isn't that remarkable to think about?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think, well, why did he do it? Why did he allow it? But life is life, and Christ is with us every step of the way, and he hurts, and there's so much we don't understand. But that's
Yep.
okay, as
Mhm.
long as we know that he's there and he's going to make I don't know, some sense of it, but like you were saying, Nate, that he can bring peace, even though you don't know how it's going to end.
Mhm.
But there's peace even in the midst of it. This has been an incredible interview. My guests have been Nate and Anna Weeber, and their book is 18 Days of Grace. Where can people find your book?
It is on Amazon. I saw it on Walmart.
Yep, you can find it online through Amazon or Walmart, or you can go directly through our website, which is 18daysofgrace.com.
Well, I strongly recommend that everybody go out and buy a copy, because it's an extraordinary story, not just of what you guys went through, but how God showed up. I know God is always there, but sometimes when the situation's like that, he's really there. It's that know
Yeah.
that you know that you know. Well, I'm sorry for what you went through. I personally am blessed to hear your story, and I know it's going to be a blessing to so many other people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Friends, more than I want this podcast to be merely entertainment for you, my prayer is that it leaves a positive impact on your life. Nate and Anna's story is a powerful reminder that God is good, God is present, and He can and does intervene in our lives. If you're in need of a miracle, I pray this conversation from today was hope filled to boost your spirit as you continue to struggle with your need. Now, on to my points to ponder. 1. When horror hits, drop to your knees. As we live our daily lives, we have the belief that if we're strong enough, if we have the right emotional fortitude, that we'll survive. But that's before tragedy hits. Once it hits us between the eyes, we suddenly realize how little we can do to get through. And that's when we're at the end of our capabilities. We drop to our knees because God is the only one we know to turn to. 2, lean on your spouse. Don't turn away from one another. Pain in parenting can turn parents away from one another or closer together. Even if there's tension between you, move toward your spouse, not away. You are the ones who live with your child the most. You are the ones who can lift one another up most. So pull together, even if it's hard. It might be the difference between getting through or collapsing. 3, ask for help. If you have friends or family, reach out. Don't hide your troubles. It's tempting to do, but don't do it. You need help. So identify those around you who will move in and give you sincere help. There are more friends and loved ones than you realize who are in your world and would love the opportunity to help in any way they can. So ask for specific help, prayers, help with kids, or ask for help from an ailing parent you've been caring for. I want to thank my very special guests today, Nate and Anna Weeber. You can learn more about the Weebers and their story by following their Facebook page, 18 Days of Grace. And you can also find their book on Amazon. It's very inspirational, and I strongly encourage you to read their book. Now, let's recap my points to ponder. 1, when horror hits, drop to your knees. 2, lean on your spouse. Don't turn away. And 3, ask for help. Friends, if you need help or encouragement or answers to any questions about your kids or your relationship with them, go to meekerparenting.com. I have courses, tips, blogs, and more to help you. And if you know a dad who needs encouragement, while you're there, check out my brand new course, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters Masterclass. And always remember, great kids are raised, not born.